Welcome to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling. You are about to discover impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you, so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Be sure you visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now tune in, get ready, and enjoy the journey of emerging as a leader of exception in the 21st century.
Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Vicki Noethling, coming to you from Roswell, Georgia. The goal of this podcast is to empower our guests as confident leaders by bringing topics and guests that will help you take your business and your life to the next level. Today, I have Kelly Charles Collins as my guest, and let me tell you about her. She is a keynote and award-winning TEDx speaker, retired trial attorney, and law firm partner, and author. She's often sought after as an authority in courageous conversations, unconscious bias, and women's empowerment. A transformative keynote speaker and mentor, Kelly has been featured in some of the biggest media publications and outlets, including ABC, NBC, CBS, Time.com, Forbes, Fast Company, Authority Magazine, Women's Wear Daily, Thrive Global, and more. She is also an author of Conversations Change Things and The Perfect, PER, capitalized FECT, Framework for Courageous Conversations and Unapologetic. And you have AF:34 ways. So what does the AF stand for?
You really want to know?
Is it a legal term that I need to know?
No, it's not legal. It's as the four-letter word that we all don't like to say.
Oh, so instead of having that asterisk, well, you have an asterisk in the perfect too.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I have a book that's, and I have that four-letter word in the title of my book too. All right.
We're kindred spirits.
34 ways to unleash your inner badass.
Yep.
We could have another podcast just on that book, I think. Yeah. I thought today, though, I'd like to talk about women's empowerment.
Okay, great.
My audience, that's my goal, is to find ways, connect women, entrepreneurs especially, with things and people that will help them grow their business and empower them so they get over that self-sabotage we always have. So please welcome Kelly Charles Collins.
Thank you, Vicki, for having me. This is going to be awesome. And as I said, we're kindred spirits.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And it's the easiest question I start with is just to let everybody know where you are calling in from. I'm in Roswell, Georgia. Where are you?
I'm in Orlando, Florida, and I used to live in Johns Creek, Georgia.
Oh, wow. That's so cool.
Yeah.
The name sounds familiar. I wonder if we've crossed paths at all.
When
did you leave?
Oh, we left there in 2010 or 11, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've been here since 86. So. And if you did anything with Toastmasters, you would know. Awesome. So, Orlando, you are in the happiest place in the world, but
it's Florida, so we don't know about that so much right now, but we're here.
Very true.
We're here.
So let's just kind of get right into that. When we talk about women's empowerment, I mentioned earlier that women often have issues with self-esteem, obviously self-confidence, which I try to focus on. And they have that inner argument with themselves constantly. So how do you help a woman get over that to really understand the power that she possesses?
Yes, that's a great question. So for me, I really have women think about themselves from their core. I used to do fitness bikini competitions. And one of the things years ago. And
Yeah.
one of the things that, my trainer would always work on is the core, right? Like make sure that when you're doing any type of workout, they're always saying like, your core. And so I always talk to women about just really honing in on the belief that we're powerful at our core. Because I think when we start to say to people like you're strong and you can do the things, that doesn't really give you a lot. But if I think about myself as being powerful at my core, what I'm saying to you is not that things will not rock you, right? Not that things are always going to be the best, but when your core is solid, when you think of yourself as just being internally this powerful being, that though they'll rock you, they're not going to knock you down, right? It's like the weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. Why? Because there's something that's holding them there. And so I always try to think, talk to women that I work with about that, like really understanding that. Now, to get there, there has to be a clarity about who you are. So we're often chasing confidence, but confidence, I believe, comes through clarity. And so we have to get very clear about who we are in the world and who we want to be, not what everybody else has said, not what society has said about us and, what we should be and who we should be and when we should shut up and when we should shine our light, when we should dim, but who do we truly want to be in the world and how do we want to show up every single day? So I think once we get that clarity, then that will increase our confidence and our courage to just stand, right, and be who we are. And so that core starts to get really strengthened so that when the things that happen to us on a daily basis, on a yearly basis, that, just shake us, know that we're still going to be okay.
Yeah. And that's so true. And I think core is just a wonderful way to kind of describe that. And the life that we live, whether we're an entrepreneur or a housewife or a person that's working, whether management or not, you have to do things that are hard.
Yeah.
And having your core strength is really a way that you can. And there are times where you will fall, but do you get back up?
Yeah.
And I think that's, again, where the core strength really comes in. And I love that you talk about courage. I talk about that all the time as a way that you get confidence, because I think a lot of us go through life risk averse because we're afraid of being afraid of fear, and still have that caveman, fear of fear, and the courage sometimes gets squashed down quite a lot. And the thing, as a parent too, how you react to those things, you're teaching your kids.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The things that we do, the things that we say, right? We're always saying, do as I say, not as I do, but they're watching all of it. Kids watch all of it. And it's funny that you say that, what you just said. This morning, I was brushing my teeth and I was thinking to myself about sales, right? And just like that, I don't really love the whole sales process. And I was like, where did that fear come from? Because when I was a little girl, I would go out and how they would give us those, I can't think of the name. Oh, the Scholastic, we had to go out and sell we had to sell all the little magazines and books and the wrapping paper. And I did not care. Like I would go knock on anybody's door. Like I would sell that stuff and sell it and all kinds of stuff, S&H green stamps, like all the stuff. And then I was like, so where does that fear come from? So you were saying like, the fear of the fear. And it's like the fear, sometimes it's the fear of succeeding, the fear of being, who we are way beyond anything that, anybody could think of. And it's such an interesting phenomenon that as we get older, and, they say, when you know better, you do better. But it seems like when we know more, we fear more and we don't like take as many chances and take those risks, but everyone's watching us. I went to a conference to see some people at a conference this weekend. And I was talking to one of my friends and, people were just like coming by and saying hi and saying like, oh, I've seen that you've been doing this. I've been watching you. And people don't necessarily say anything, but people are watching. Right. And so just like the kids are watching, people in your circle, your friends are watching, your employers are watching, your employees are watching. And so we have to show up in this, powerful. Obviously it's not every day, but we have to be mindful that however we're showing up in the world, somebody's watching.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So how do you create or cultivate a safe, inclusive, and accountable culture? And I think that maybe have to be unpacked for each of the different
Yeah.
things, but it's in the world that we live in. I don't know that it's really any different than the 60s that I grew up in. It's more there in your face than we had, with only 3 channels.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and now people feel more comfortable saying the quiet part out loud.
Yeah.
Right. And so mostly when I talk about safe, inclusive, accountable cultures, it's around corporate spaces, right?
Yes.
So I talk about like unconscious bias and
Mm-hmm.
bystander intervention and courageous conversations, but those things also lead into women. So when I retired from the practice of law in 2019, and starting, right before the pandemic, one of the things that I created was a community called Ladies Who Leverage. And the reason I created that was to create a safe space for women that was inclusive, that they could, ask for what they wanted, ask for what they needed, ask questions where they didn't feel judged or felt stupid. I think in order to do that, you really have to set boundaries when you're talking about creating safe spaces and talking about creating inclusive spaces. And if you're responsible for creating that space, then you have to model what it is that you're trying to get other people to do. And so when I created that space, I created it with safety in mind so that women could come in, those who identify, could come into that space and feel that they could now ask the questions that they may not feel comfortable asking somewhere else, right? Because maybe you're a lawyer or a doctor or you're a housewife or whatever. And you think, well, if I ask that, they're going to be like, well, you should already know that. Like, why don't you know that? Like, why aren't you this far along? Right? All of those things. Yeah. And because I don't love traditional networking, it was my way of bringing women together in a space where I'm like, okay, you can cut out all the fluff. Just ask what you need. Like if you need a resource, if you need expertise, if you need a referral, if you need a job, right? If you need a client, just ask, right? And we'll get to know each other in the process. So I coined this term called collabosourcing, which was to leverage your expertise, resources, and relationships to build your business, your brand, and your badassery. And that is how we worked within the community. And so our motto was, we don't compete, we collabosource, so that the women understood that we could be doing the same thing. We could have the same type of client base, but not everybody's for everybody. So we can still share, we can still ask questions, you can still put things out there and not be afraid that people are going to steal it from you, right? Or go harm you in some way. So I think it's really just creating those boundaries and being the model of the behavior that you expect to see.
Yeah. I know whenever I talk with people about the fact that there are so many coaches out there that do the same thing that I do. But it's really not, people don't buy your product or your service, they buy you. And so you need to show up authentically and be comfortable as who you are. And, if they don't want to work with you, it's not that they're never going to get improvement. They're just going to find somebody that they resonate better with.
Yeah.
And you're not everybody's going to love you. So sorry.
No. And you don't love them either, right?
That's exactly right. Like I have a no jerks rule too.
Yeah. It's funny, when I lived in Atlanta, I had a wedding and event planning business. And so I used to mentor other wedding planners. And I would speak at some of our meetings that we would have, and I would teach them different things. And they would say to me, I can't believe you're telling us all this. I said, I could tell you every single thing that's in my brain. You will never in life be able to do it the way that I do it. You'll never be able to say it the way I say it. So it doesn't matter. I can tell you everything.
And that is so true. And, I have 4 different coaches, but each of them brings something different to the table, but all of them kind of teach the same thing overall, overarching, but they just have certain specialties, and that I need.
Yeah.
So you just have to find, especially to be impactful, I have to trust you.
Mhm.
You know, I have to be able to be vulnerable in front of you, cry in front of you, and
Yes.
tell you embarrassing things about what I did and screwed up in my business. And if
And
I
know
don't
that it
feel
won't end
that,
up on Facebook and
right,
TikTok
right,
and
that's
Instagram.
the integrity and the
Yes.
trust factor. And there are just some people that you meet them and you know they just need this income. They're just doing this for another zero in the end of their balance sheet.
Yeah,
And that's not a person that I would want to work with.
absolutely.
So what about those, I love it, courageous conversations. And there's so many different types of conversations. Whenever I teach public speaking, one of my coins is that it's just a conversation. So,
Yep.
you know, but, you know, whenever we have those difficult conversations or courageous conversations, we tend to avoid them. So talk about the pros and cons, or the do's and don'ts maybe
Yeah.
of a courageous conversation.
Yeah. So first, let's just talk about, what is a courageous conversation? Because some people may not know what we're referring to. So when I talk about courageous conversations, what I'm talking about is having a conversation about a difficult topic or a sensitive topic. So those topics that are going to raise people's emotions, right? And get maybe it's fear, it might be anger, it might be mistrust, whatever it is, but there's
Or
this emotional
confusion
charge.
too. I mean,
Confusion. Yep. Behind the topic that needs to be discussed. And so because of that, you were talking about people being risk averse. A lot of people are also, they don't like confrontation. So they're averse to that. And they're averse to having a conversation that may illuminate something about them. Or it may, cause a disruption in a family structure, an employment setting, may cause you to lose a friend, right? And so we don't necessarily want to confront those types of things. Now you have people like me who are attorneys who are like, yeah, let's go. It's confrontation. Let's go, right?
Yeah, I live for this.
But also, though, thinking about trying to take a step back and really thinking about these conversations as just that, like a conversation and not a confrontation, right? Because when we hear difficult, we hear hard, then we think, oh, this is just going to be like, I got to go in there and I got to fight. No, you don't, right? In these conversations, just make sure it's just a conversation. It's just about a difficult subject. So now how do we tackle that subject? And first things first is, oftentimes when we have these things, we have a lot of things we want to tell people, like, I need to tell you about this and that, right? And because we've let them build up over time. So once you get the courage to have these conversations, one of the things to do is just really focus in, like, what is that one thing that I want to talk to this person about right now, right? And then think about, why this conversation? Why with this person? Why about this topic? Why now? Right.
And that's really tied to the women empowerment, because a lot of times you want to just like, okay, well, whether it's male or a stronger woman than you, I'm just not going to push this. I know it's wrong. I know in my heart that I'm right, or that I have the better way to do things, but I just will let them walk all over me.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when we're talking about our core, right, going back to our core, that's something that we have to, that is also part of the muscle, right, of building the muscle of understanding that, no, what I have to say is valuable. It does not mean that that person's going to agree with me. So when I'm having this conversation, it's a dialogue. So it's an exchange of information, an exchange of ideas to come to an understanding, not necessarily agreement. The agreement could be, or the understanding could be, we agree to disagree. But you are now in a space that you all have created together. So co-created this space where, back to the whole thing about safety, right? And being inclusive, that everyone gets to communicate, right? And communicate their positions, communicate their position in a respectful way. And so thinking about, I always tell people, like, the bookends of these conversations, like within the perfect framework, there are 3 phases: prepare, engage, reflect. But in the preparation phase, right, 2 of the bookends in there are to figure out, what is the intention? So what is the purpose for me having this conversation? And then what is the objective? How do I want to feel after this? How do I want to leave that person feeling? If we know those two things, it will help to direct the tone and the tenor of the conversation. So as we start to engage in the conversation and we're focused in on this one issue, and we're remembering that this is a dialogue and not a debate, and we're minding our manners inside of the conversation, once that conversation is done and we're ready to reflect on what has happened in the conversation, we'll know, okay, great, I learned some information. Here's what I'm not going to do.
Yeah.
I'm not going to take that information and now create collateral damage. I'm not going to put that information out into the world because it was confidential. I'm not going to then just hold it and be like, oh, I'm gonna hold this until I can use it against you, right? At some later point. But rather what we're going to do is take that information in, we're going to analyze the information, really look at it. Are there some adjustments that we need to make? Are there some changes that I need to make? I need to follow up, right? What do I need to do now that I've had this conversation? And I need to have another conversation, whether with this person or another person, and continue to have them so that these conversations are just conversations. They're not like, oh my gosh, this hard thing, this difficult conversation. That's why I always say it's a conversation about a difficult issue, to take it away from the actual conversation being difficult and actually placing it where it should be placed, which is on the issue that's difficult. It's not the conversation that's difficult.
And I know that whenever you get in those kind of courageous conversations, the open-ended questioning is really necessary, and keep on asking why, or just to gain understanding and the other person. So if you're the person that's on the receiving end of that, sometimes that can feel uncomfortable. I just think, I'm telling you why, but it's really, I need to be sure that I'm 100% understanding your point of view, what your motivation is and all that. And that's what all these questions are. Not that I'm trying to trip you up or challenge you. And I think, and so our tone, and that going back to what I do for a living, but our tone is really important, that when we ask those questions, we do it in a way that has empathy, that really shows that we are trying to understand more and get clarity, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. And in that vein, also listening, right? And being an active listener. I always talk about not trying to double dutch, because in conversations, we're double dutching, like, when's my turn to get in, right? To jump into the rope so I can say what I want to say. And, actively listening to be able to ask those questions. And, why sometimes can put people on the defensive, because they think that you're questioning them. So I always tell people, like, when we're talking about things like this, especially like when I talk about microaggressions, right? And people say, well, why can't I ask that question? It's not the question, it's the questioning. So it's the questioning of their response, or right, that causes people to be, give you a little side eye. So, really thinking about what is the question that you're asking. And so maybe like if you're asking a why question, so that you're not just always saying why, maybe saying something like, what I'm hearing you say is this. And so I want to know, is that what you're saying? And why why do you feel that way? Why, what is it about such and such that has you think this? Or so really let them know that you've heard them and this is your interpretation. And that when I'm asking why, or what I'm seeking is clarification, I'm not questioning your response.
We can't say like we did it as parents, because I said so.
Right. Even though you want to sometimes.
End of discussion.
Right. Because I said what I said.
No, I just don't. We are not going there, sir. All right. So let's talk about some more about the women's leadership and empowerment. I'm all about women's leadership, and I think that is what's going to make our world a better place, and why I do what I do now in my retirement. So let's first talk about women's leadership and where you think we may be going, and how we can maybe make things better, and then how empowerment plays a big role in that.
So obviously there's big pushes around women. Some of it is to restrict us, right? And some of it, just in the space of women and women supporting women, is this real push to push women forward. But I also think that in those two things, there's a little bit of a crossover, because we often fear as women that there's only a finite number of spaces. And so when we get into those spaces, so even though like we have in our minds, like, yes, women empowerment and take up spaces, and like, yeah, we need to push women forward. It's like, okay, great. I got pushed forward and now I have this space, and now I'm looking around. I'm like, okay, now if I pull somebody in, does that push me out? Right. And so while we have this whole thing about, yes, we're going to empower women, we're going to pull women in, is it really? Because are we really looking over here at all the things that are trying to restrict us and allowing that to cause us not to be full force in the real push for women's empowerment? And then as we're empowering women, who are we empowering? Are we only empowering women who look like us, right? Are we still afraid, right? There's always this tension, right? And we have to be real about this. There's always this tension between white women and Black women, right? And so oftentimes when we're talking about women and we're talking about women's empowerment, it's not specifically related to Black women, right? There is a kind of general understanding that this is around white women. And then when, people raise their voices like, oh no, but you're included too. Yeah.
I just interviewed an Asian person who was a CP or CEO, and that is even a further minority.
Right. And so I think that's the other thing. When we start to have these conversations about women's empowerment, and when we talk about diversity and how diversity has really benefited white women over other women, we just have to get really, really real about these conversations and be honest about these conversations. And then we also have to be honest about when we're having a conversation about women's empowerment and you have Black women, Latino women, Asian women who create communities where they're focused, right, on women who look like them and really pushing them forward and empowering them, that we don't get the pushback about, well, why aren't we included? Right. And so then that causes another rift. So the whole women's empowerment movement can't really get to where it needs to go, because there's always these undercurrents about, being inclusive or exclusive. And I always tell people, if you hear me talking about like Black women, you hear me calling them out, it's because there's a focus. It's not an exclusion, it's a focus. Right. And so I think as women, we have to get really clear about that there are points where we're talking about women as a whole. And then there are points where we have to then just really work together to focus so that we can pull everybody together.
Right. I just remember all my years as school age. And even now, if you go in networking, the cliques just kind of create a barrier, and it's not intentional in the networking piece, but it still creates that barrier that adds to the fear that makes you not feel comfortable, if you will. I just think we need to think like men sometimes, in the sense that a man doesn't go there and think, oh, well, I'm not going to try for this job because of color of skin or education or anything. They just go for it. And we just that's where I love the badass. We just need to be badass about it and say, why wouldn't I go for that?
But I think even there, and Vicki, we also have to be clear about that too. That's usually white men, right? Because Black men, Asian men, Latino men do have some of those trepidations.
That is very honest. That is very true.
And so I think and that's why I say like these conversations, I love having these types of conversations, because I think it's really important. And for people to not be afraid to call a thing, right? I think in that fear of, like, just, I don't want to say that part. No, just say it, because it, right, it is what it is. And then we can talk about it. Then we can address it. And then we can ask these questions about, well, why do you feel like that? Like, what is it about the experiences that you've had that will cause you to believe that? Okay, great. Let me explain this to you. Let me tell you what has happened to me, right? As a Black woman lawyer, let me explain to you what has happened to me as a Black woman lawyer, why I say to you that my experience as a lawyer is different from my white female colleagues, my white male colleagues, right? And so there can then be a discussion from a point of real information, as opposed to an assumption or just discounting because it's never happened to you.
And you can't ever get to that place that we need to get to unless you have those discussions.
That's right.
You know, the
conversations change things.
The world will never change, and it will still always be a battle unless we have those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not easy.
No, it isn't easy.
It's not easy, but
and if I am honest, as a white woman who completely agrees with what you're saying, sometimes I'm not what I'm saying that is sometimes not really, well, you're just saying that to I don't know, stand out or whatever. And it's like, but no, this is what I truly
and just
my heart believe, and it's kind of like frustrating sometimes.
And you just have to listen, we have to be the more outspoken, because in general, people who want there to be this unity and for people to just be, right, and just live, I think are the majority. I believe that in my heart that we're the majority. However, we're like the silent majority because we're so afraid. So we've given now the power, right, to the minority to be able to just treat people the way that they feel like, saying whatever they want to say, hold women back, do whatever, right? We've given them the power because in our silence lies complicity. So if we don't say anything, then they're like, oh, well, we can just keep doing it. Either they agree with it or they're too scared to say anything. So we're just going to keep going. And so then we're all sitting back like, no, this is not.
Because a silence in a sale means it's a no. But if you have silence in trying to make a change, it's a no. You're not going to make a change.
Yeah. So we have to just speak up. It's hard. And, and when people question you, you don't have to. I always tell people, I watch what people do more than I listen to what they say, right? Because your actions will betray your words. So, if you're a person, Vicki, who's saying, and you're saying to people, don't even worry about if they question you. The way that you show up in the world will speak way more voluminous and more volume than anything than you saying, or you trying to, I don't even try to convince people. It is what it is. So just watch. What's his name? The singer, he says, don't believe me, just watch.
I don't know.
Oh, forget his name.
I know I have seen your brain sometimes, so I'm not good at that. So this is the next question, and we're running out of time, but positioning yourself as an expert and authority. I have a talk next week that I'm part of called Action Talks, and one of the things that they're going to be talking about is positioning yourself as the authority. And we have so many platforms now to be able to do that, more so than whenever I was coming up into the world. Talk about how we can do that effectively.
Okay.
Through your
first
voice.
thing you have to know, what is it that you're an authority in?
That's true.
Right.
And sometimes people they think that, I'm not an authority in anything. And then you talk to them
and you're like, you're brilliant. So first is doing an assessment of who are you and who do you want to be in the world? So what is the impact that you want to create? And do you have the chops to do that? Right? Because oftentimes we want to talk about things and you don't have the chops to do that. And when I say the chops, it's not necessarily that you have a PhD or a JD or anything like that. Do you have, it could be that, the professional experience, the educational experience, the personal experience, where your knowledge is deep, not wide. right? So oftentimes people will have a breadth of knowledge as opposed to a depth of knowledge.
Yeah.
And then, like, who do you want to communicate this information to? Like, who is it that you're trying to transform? And do you really understand what it is that they desire? So what is their problem, and what is it that they desire? And are you the person to be able to get them that transformation? And so, really understanding those things. And then to your point about there being so many platforms, right? Where are they though? Right? Where are those people? And where are they making the decisions that relate to what you need to do? So if it's a buying decision, where are those people making buying decisions? So for example, somebody asked me today if I'm on TikTok. Yes, I'm on TikTok, but you know how I'm on TikTok? For entertainment. Yeah. I'm not on there to find a coach. I'm not on there to, I did buy a juicer. I will say that. Did buy a juicer because of TikTok. But I'm not on there to make like business decisions, right?
Me either.
So, right. So if you're trying to get me to hire you as a coach, or you won't find me on TikTok. Now, you may find me on Facebook. I may, be interested in your content around that on Facebook or on LinkedIn, but I'm not on IG for that. I'm not on TikTok for that. So you also have to figure out where they are and where they're making the decision that is related to your call to action. And then you got to show up, and you have to show up in a way that you are the authority. It's funny, I'm getting ready to do a 3-day authority elevation workshop, because it's really important. It's something that I work with my clients on, about once you have this talk that we help you create, now people have to know. People have to know who you are. And so, how do you do that in a way that's intentional and strategic so that it gets across the point, and you're not just showing up and just saying any random thing to any random people on any random platform. And then you're like, well, why didn't that work? Because. Because.
And I think, whenever you know what you know, I think the best things are the things that I hate to say passionate about, but things I've lived there, done that, and had the pain and survived. And so you have that story to tell that people can resonate with. But a lot of people, I think, don't take time to reflect when they decide they want to go in business, who they are and why do you want to do what you want to do? What is that desire that, keeps you up at night that you need to deal with?
Yeah. And why should other people care about it? There's a lot of them, right? Well, a lot of people who are thought leaders, what they want to do in elevating their authority is for somebody to pay them, right? Either to speak on a stage or to do corporate training. So yes, great. Why, we dig deep. We do the whole whys, keep going till sometimes they're crying, but it's because we're getting to the place where we need to get to. But why do you want to do that? But I always tell them that, like in the money matrix, the money is at the level of why. So why do you want to do it? But why should somebody else care enough to want to pay you?
Yeah. And I think a lot of times people think they spend too much time on the what's and even the how before they even establish the why and the pain
and the why is a differentiator. Right. So I had submitted a proposal once, and it was a 6-figure proposal, and the client ended up choosing me, and he said, listen, you were not the lowest. He said, but when I spoke to you, I understood that this was something that you just don't do, that this means something to you. Like this is a part of who you are, a part of your life. And so that's why we chose you, because it wasn't just a job. And so, yes, that why is like where your differentiator comes in, because who else doesn't have that? The what and the how?
Everybody's got that.
Everybody's got that. There's nothing new under the sun.
Tons of people teach public speaking.
That's right.
And tons of people teach leadership. But, the reason I teach what I teach, it has a big why behind it.
Right. And it will direct what it is that you talk about. It'll direct the point of view from which because that's the other differentiator, right? Your point of view. We all are talking about the same things. We're not creating anything new under the sun, right? New. But it's what is our point of view on how we deliver that message, right? The way that you teach public speaking is completely different than the way that I teach it, and the point of view from which I teach it, right? And so, like for me, like my why around teaching, speaking, and teaching women how to develop their talks. I teach men too, but how to develop their talks is because I have a real aversion to women's value being erased.
Yeah.
Right. And I believe that not having that talk and understanding your true value is allowing you to be complicit in that erasure. And so I decided to do what I need to do. So I developed my program to address the why for me. So that's how I teach. Same thing with you, Vicki. Like, you have a why. And so you've developed whatever it is that you're doing in your programs to address, right? To be able to use and leverage that why to get them the transformation that they need.
Yeah, to get to be those confident people that I want you.
That's right.
We could probably talk for days,
Forever.
for days and days, but it is really time for us to wrap this up and show your screen the slide that has all your contact information. If you have been at all moved, or what she has said, it has resonated with you, please take a moment, if you are just listening, to grab that paper and pencil to get her website information. But all this information will be on my YouTube and my website if you did not have time to do this. So those that are just listening, her website is https://kellycharlescollins.com. Again, kellycharlescollins.com. She is on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram using her name. Primarily, though, you want to go to her website and LinkedIn, but I'll let her talk to you what you would find on those two locations.
So on my website, you will find all of my programs, how I serve corporations, how I serve individuals. You'll be able to link to all of the different programs that I do. On my LinkedIn, you'll find my thoughts. So I'm always posting. You'll see highlights of when I've been speaking somewhere, what, testimonials. I have a newsletter. And so you'll hear thought leadership. We were talking about thought leadership. That's where you'll find a lot of my thought leadership is on LinkedIn. But if you just want to know who I am and watch videos of me and see what people have to say about me, etc., you go to my kellycharlescollins.com.
Very good. Awesome. Well, it has been just really wonderful talking to you. I enjoyed it immensely, and I definitely would be sure to follow you and have you back again, where we can talk a little bit more about some other topics that we couldn't get to today, especially that 34 ways to unleash your inner badass. I think that will be a great next time to talk together. Awesome. So thank you again. And as I always tell everybody, to remember that life is a journey and it's up to you to enjoy the ride. This is Vicki Noethling signing off.
Thank you for tuning into the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling, where we share impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Remember to visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast.